Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So it's a rainy Saturday evening here at Cittaviveka Buddhist Monastery. We've just passed the midpoint of Vasa, and now Ajahn Lumpur Suchito is away teaching, and Ajahn Kaccana and Ajahn Hingsako are on personal retreat. And I think in just a few days we'll lose another 3 monks will go on retreat, and some nuns too. So we'll have a smaller crew for 2 or 3 weeks. And as is our tradition with you don't teach Dhamma unless it's requested, which is what Anagarika Deepa, her chant beginning with Brahma Chaloka. And since there's no monk senior to me in the hall, I just pay respects to the Buddha before beginning the Dhamma talk. I was thinking just about talking a bit about the practice of metta meditation, so often called loving kindness. Maybe a somewhat more precise translation would probably be goodwill. And this is a classical form of meditation. The details are in the commentary rather than the suttas themselves. But it's a very, very classical technique. And of course there's different interpretations. But this was early on in my meditation practice. I found this very helpful. A couple of years before I actually went to a Bayagiri to begin training. And particularly when I was having difficulty, this is what I would go back to when I was getting depressed and fed up with just having to complete this PhD that my heart really wasn't in anymore, and then also fed up with my sort of the avoidance activities, just spending late nights browsing various web comics, etc., just because again, my heart really wasn't in what I was doing. So, and at that time, the book I was using was Sharon Salzberg's Loving Kindness, The Revolutionary Art of Happiness, which is, my understanding is that that's a very good rendition of the classical commentaries approach to good meditation on goodwill. But at the same time, over the years, my own practice has modified it a bit, and so I'll describe a bit of both. But again, I found it effective. It's what I would use to sort of get myself out of holes. And so I think, well worth sharing and reflecting on. If I'm not mistaken, the first chapter of meditation instructions in Sharon Salzberg's book, she begins with the practice of forgiveness. And I'm not sure whether that's in the commentaries or not, but I found it very, very useful. And the reflections that she gave were, just when you're practicing, start with, every time you're going to practice meditation on goodwill, begin with forgiveness practice and keep going with that until you feel ready for loving kindness. And the mental phrases that she suggested, I still use them. And so just, if I have harmed anyone, knowingly or unknowingly, intentionally or unintentionally, I ask their forgiveness and forgive myself to the extent that I am able. If anyone has harmed me, knowingly or unknowingly, intentionally or unintentionally, I forgive them to the extent that I am able. If I have harmed myself, knowingly or unknowingly, intentionally or unintentionally, I forgive myself to the extent that I am able. I find those words have a lot of wisdom in there about what forgiveness is and how to use it well. They're broad, expansive. It recognizes that sometimes we harm ourselves or others unintentionally and unknowingly. Other times intentionally and knowingly. It's a bit perverse, but you actually do things that you know this isn't good for you, and you still do it. And it's really critical to acknowledge that, and to recognize that even when we intentionally mess up, it might be even more important to forgive ourselves for those things, because they're less unintentional mistakes, have less comic weight to them. But if we want to move forward, if we want to practice goodwill towards ourselves and others, we need to set the intention to let go of past hindrances. But notice that the words don't say, I forgive them, or I forgive myself. It's, I forgive them to the extent that I am able, which recognizes the reality that forgiveness is a process. And if we demand to be able to immediately drop ill will towards people who have harmed us, it's a nice ideal, doesn't work. And we just add one more layer of tangle to the situation that we're in. So, but setting that intention, recognizing that ill will, however seemingly justified, ill will always hurts me. And that's probably the central bit of understanding what forgiveness is. You forgive people not for their sake, but for yours. If you hold ill will, you hurt. And that you can just investigate it, and you'll find, ill will is painful every time. And it's very important to distinguish between forgiveness and reconciliation, because forgiveness is unilateral. You forgive someone for what they've done, and it's recommended that you do that no matter what attitude they have towards you. Even if they think that what they did was totally right and justified, or they still just hate your guts or even want to kill you, you still want to forgive them. Because otherwise, the alternative is just added misery for yourself. But reconciliation is very different. That's bilateral. And it's very clear that we cannot always reconcile with people. It doesn't, you can forgive people and simultaneously recognize that the best thing to do is to get as far away from them as you can. That's the best approach to the situation. And those are not contradictions at all. It's just recognizing, okay, what's best for the situation is non-contact. Get away. But you don't have to have ill will towards the person or the other person or the situation or yourself. This is, in extreme events, this is very advanced practice. But it can be done. It's a matter of probably years and decades, but one of the Ajahn Bodhipala, one of the senior nuns at Amaravati, the short story is she was the wife of an official in the Cambodian government when the Khmer Rouge came in. He got a plane ticket for both of them to get out of Cambodia as it was falling. At the last minute, her husband thought, no, I can still do some good here. I'll stay on. So he stayed in he canceled his flight, stayed in Cambodia, and she went to France, I think. The Khmer Rouge wiped out, killed her husband, killed all the other leaders, probably most of her relatives. And there she was in France alone. But she ended up after years of practice, she ended up forgiving the Khmer Rouge. And it turned out, and it's totally necessary because Ajahn Bodhipala has returned to Cambodia many times to help the people of Cambodia, and some of the current leaders were associated with the Khmer Rouge, and she needed to work with them. And so to continue to hold the grudges would have hurt everyone. That's pretty awesome. And fortunately, most of us probably don't have to forgive to that extent. But it demonstrates the principles in a useful way, I believe. And so, when the heart is sufficiently softened with forgiveness practice, and this can either take a long time or a short time, or alternatively, the mind just starts getting bored. That's also a sign that it's good to move on, because if the mind just isn't resonating with those phrases, there's no point in trying to continue with them. Just move on to the main body of the practice. And here, the classical way of practicing loving kindness is using, just like that forgiveness practice, using mentally repeating phrases. Sharon Salzberg goes through the details of it all. I believe she's faithful to the commentary. What's very clear from the commentary is that the first person that you send, the first person that you send loving kindness to, or sending may even not be quite the best way to think about it. The first person that you sort of soak in loving kindness, is yourself. And sometimes this can be, my sense is that the people who, at the time of the commentary, their culture probably had less sort of self-guilt problems than many Westerners. So it was non-problematic, I believe, at that time. Sometimes Westerners have more trouble with loving kindness towards themselves than anyone else. But this is my experience is the forgiveness practice helps a lot with this. That if I have harmed myself knowingly or unknowingly, intentionally or unintentionally, I forgive myself to the extent that I am able, is a very good reflection for reducing ill will and animosity or towards ourselves, for getting in touch with the sense of really caring for ourselves, wanting what is really good for ourselves. And it's important to recognize that that's not selfish. And I'll come back to that a little bit later. With the actual phrases that you use, you can be a bit creative with this. I've found that personally I don't have to be that creative. Several years into my monastic life, I found that these the phrases that we chanted after the homage to the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, the may I abide in well-being, in freedom from affliction, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, and may I maintain well-being in myself. That has continued to have sufficient resonance with me that I haven't had to explore a lot of other options. That one. So I find that very useful. It's useful to reflect on that. May I abide in well-being, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may I maintain well-being in myself. One thing is that one notices that it's not wishing any sort of physical conditions, or at least overtly. You're certainly not wishing yourself to get more stuff or to be more liked by other people, or to, it's much more wishing yourself qualities of heart. And these qualities of heart make the more free we are from hostility, ill will, and anxiety, the better we can contribute to whatever situation we're in. And so these are totally unselfish things. And I think I really appreciate the Buddha's emphasis on being free from afflictions and hindrances, rather than trying to give the details of what that freedom is. Technically, I think this is called the sort of apathetic method, describing what nibbana isn't, rather than what it is, and you tend to trip over that. So it's useful to notice that, freedom from hostility, freedom from ill will. These are not minor things. My understanding is that a being who is totally free from hostility and ill will is an anagami, one who is, in the Buddhist cosmology, totally unbound from sensual desire as well. And, two stages beyond stream entry. Not so. May I abide in freedom from hostility. May I abide in freedom from ill will. Okay, right. These are not small things you're wishing for yourself. And then freedom from anxiety. My understanding is only arahants are totally free from anxiety. It's even more subtle. So, very, very powerful, very wholesome, very deep. And so these wishes can go a long way. So when you reflect on these, the experience, it begins as a verbal experience, but the heart, at least my heart, responds by brightening. There's a sense of uplift, a sense of ease, happiness, and one can notice the particularly the bodily effects of that, but also the mental. And when they become strong enough, one can experiment with using those perceptions of goodwill and well-being as the meditation object instead of these phrases. My teacher Lumpur Pasano calls this the metta nimitta. It's possible the commentary mentions it somewhere. It's not anything specific, like a particular point of light or something. It's more just whatever the qualities that arise when one is really dwelling in that sense of goodwill towards oneself and others. And then the classical meditation on goodwill continues. Once one has established goodwill towards oneself, one then goes through either singular people or categories of people. So I think it's recommended to start with just singular people. So the first one after yourself is a benefactor, someone who you feel very grateful towards. This can commonly be your spiritual teacher, or your parents if you have a good relationship with them. And so someone who you naturally feel a sense of goodwill towards already. And so you can then change the phrases, may, say, in my case, may Ajahn Pasano, may Ajahn Pasano abide in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may he maintain well-being in himself. And my sense is that one might have visualize, say, sending, sort of beaming goodwill out to Ajahn Pasano. But maybe more helpful to imagine sort of bringing, instead of sending it out, bringing Ajahn Kaccana or whoever you're using into your field of goodwill. So you've cultivated this field of goodwill right here, and instead of moving out, you bring in. That can keep the meditation more focused, and it feels less dissipating. And then the classical list continues with, after a benefactor, you move on to a friend, someone who more of a peer, someone who you naturally feel goodwill towards, but it's not, more of a peer, somewhat. Then from a friend, you go on to a neutral person. Sometimes that's going to be hard to find, but you just, maybe someone like, maybe the postman, for example, someone who you see frequently but you barely interact with, have no particular perceptions about one way or another. And finally, on to classically it's enemy, you could say difficult person. After you've been able to bring your neutral person into this field of goodwill, and instead of feeling neutral towards them, you start to cultivate that goodwill, then you can try with a difficult person. And with all of these, it's helpful to pick an uncomplicated relationship. Ideally, pick someone of the gender you're not attracted to. Sometimes one of the drawbacks or dangers of practicing goodwill meditation is sometimes it can slip into romantic attraction or sexual desire, in which case you need to switch the object or stop it altogether. We're not trying to be infatuated with anyone, and if you really understand this freedom from hostility, freedom from ill will, freedom from anxiety, that's actually not compatible with romantic attachment. If you're romantically attached to someone, you tend to increase your levels of anxiety if anything were to happen to that. So that's a step away from what you're looking for. And so, just be aware of it and adjust if that happens. And then once one has, again, these are the classical instructions. Once one has gone through all of that, you then bring all beings, or sometimes you can use classes of beings. You could use all beings in Dhamma Hall, all human beings, all four-footed beings, or all footless beings, the various snakes we have in our forest. Again, if you're doing this as an extended practice, it can be useful to keep modifying this, just to keep the interest. And then also eventually just get to all beings everywhere, in the sense of bringing all beings into this space of goodwill that you've cultivated. These days, I've found that I tend to, for me, it seems to be helpful just to go from myself to all beings. Depends. If I was practicing this, if I were doing, say, a whole, many hours of goodwill practice every day, I might switch back to these categories just to keep things interesting. But that was what I found. variations on this, so far, you're probably imagining that I'm talking about sitting meditation only, but I've found this very helpful during walking meditation, and even not just the sort of back and forth walking meditation, but even if you're, say, going pindabat, or in particular walking up a difficult hill. The hills that, say, here we've got tame hills. The hills at Abhayagiri and Dowdum are not tame at all. And so I remember at Dowdum, after the one meal of the day, you're down at the lower sala. You've got a full belly. The Arahant steps are ahead of you. 1 hour, basically 1 hour steep uphill to get back to your dwelling. And I found particularly there's a way of saying it, may I abide in well-being, in freedom from hostility, in freedom. And so I was able to synchronize that with the steps, and that would definitely help me get up that hill. You find that you have, at least that was my experience. Put the mind there, and you've got more energy. And so the hill was less of a problem than if I was just letting my thoughts do whatever they do when I'm usually climbing hills. And this is certainly, goodwill is also it's not only formal meditation practice. I believe it's Sariputta who teaches some similes about basically how to remove a grudge or how to remove ill will. I think, what is it? I've forgotten what Ajahn Kaccana translates. The Pali he translates as grudge. Oh, Vera, V-E-R-A. It's not quite. I believe it's in that list. It's in the Averohonti. So Vera is, he translates as a grudge. And so if you're feeling sort of a grudge towards somebody, Sariputta gives five options, or five options as to how to remove that grudge. And how to remove it depends on what kind of person you've got the grudge against. And so I may not get all five. We'll see if I can remember. But the first kind of person is someone whose bodily conduct is good, but whose verbal conduct is not good. And Sariputta suggests that you don't focus on their verbal misconduct, focus on their bodily good conduct. And in that way, you might remove the grudge. And I believe he gives a simile, which I've forgotten. Similarly, there might be someone whose bodily behavior is bad, but whose verbal behavior is good. That they sort of do annoying or careless things, but they've got, but they can speak in friendly ways. And so, in that case, focus on their good verbal behavior, rather than on their bad physical behavior. And then there are some people who, most of the time, have bad verbal behavior and bad bodily behavior. Here we're getting to pretty difficult people. but sometimes these people can be self-reflective, and you can recognize sort of what's going on. And so these are people where, yeah, most of the time your interaction with them is difficult. Occasionally things go well. And Sariputta recommends focusing on the times in which their behavior is good. They have some self-awareness. And here he gives the simile of a man on a journey, and he's run out of water. And he sees in the path there's some cattle footprints that have filled with water. But these little tiny puddles. And so in order to drink the water, basically has to lie down full length on the ground and lap up the water, because if he reaches in there, he's going to make it muddy. And so in the same way, you go through great lengths to attend to the good qualities of this difficult person, and in that way, you might be able to give up your grudge. And the fourth kind of person is someone whose bodily behavior is bad, whose verbal behavior is bad, and doesn't have any moments of self-awareness. Sariputta's thorough, and he's not idealistic. He realizes there are really deluded people in the world, and sometimes these people are in our lives. And we still have to deal with it. So what he says in this case, again, he uses the simile of a man on a journey, but in this case, he finds another man who has collapsed with a fever at the side of the road. And what this man does is he basically takes lots of effort to get this feverish man to the next village where he can be cared for. And in this case, it's not any qualities of that feverish man. The feverish man can't get himself to the village at all. He's totally incapable of it. But like the Good Samaritan in Jesus' parable, the man on the journey goes out of his way to help this otherwise totally helpless man. And in that way, we can cultivate goodwill towards people who are just thoroughly difficult. And then you might have noticed there's one category that was left out, and this is people who most of the time have good bodily behavior and good verbal behavior. And you might hold a grudge against them. Again, Sariputta's being totally thorough. We can be that perverse. Someone's just a really good person, and for whatever reason, we still hate them. And in this case, Sariputta says, well, the simile here is, I think it's like, coming on a journey, coming to an oasis filled with grass. You learn, and filled with grass and water. You learn to pay attention to their good qualities and learn how to delight in them. This would be developing mudita. Because oftentimes, if someone's really good, the cause of our dislike is jealousy. We think that their goodness diminishes us, which is quite diluted. But we need to recognize that, be realistic with it, and learn how to delight in that person's goodness. So these are the 5 kinds of people, and how to remove grudges in regards to all of them. And let's see. I guess the final bit I'd like to talk about is just the relationship between practicing goodwill and insight, as described in the suttas. Because sometimes one can think, well, today I'll practice goodwill, and then maybe tomorrow I'll practice insight. Or you can think, well, I've been practicing goodwill for a long time, but I think I want some insight, so maybe I need to do something else. And I mean, that's understandable, because there's certainly, like mindfulness of breathing has insight. The 4th tetrad of mindfulness of breathing is all about insight. Breathing in, contemplating impermanence, I breathe in. Contemplating impermanence, I breathe out. Contemplating dispassion, I breathe in. Contemplating dispassion, I breathe out. Contemplating cessation, I breathe in. Contemplating cessation, I breathe out. Contemplating relinquishment, I breathe in. Contemplating relinquishment, I breathe out. So it's if you follow the Buddha's full path of mindfulness of breathing, the insight practices are right in there. But I think the ordinary progress of insight is oftentimes you have the jhanas are mentioned, and then insight after that. But there's a sutta. I think it's Ananda talking. It's in the Majjhima Nikaya, I believe. It's Ananda talking with someone who's asking him a question. It's likely after the Buddha's parinibbana, and this householder asks Ananda, is there any way, basically, can you describe a way out of this problem of human existence? I'm very much paraphrasing. I've forgotten what the exact question is. And Ananda begins by describing the cultivating the first jhana, and I won't go into the details here. But then after one has cultivated that, one reflects on whatever form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness are involved in this experience of jhana. One regards those as a barb, a tumor, empty, there's a list of 11. I won't get all of those, but they can be summarized in just the 3 characteristics, or 3 perceptions: impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and not self. So one recognizes the drawbacks of even such a wholesome state, and then recognizing those, one attends. I think it's in that suit. One attends instead towards the deathless element. And that takes a lot of unpacking, and I'm not going to try to do that completely tonight. But in this, what I will point out is that in this sutta, after the 4 jhanas, come the 4 Brahma Viharas. So goodwill is right. Goodwill is number 1 of those. And then after that come the first 3 formless attainments. So again, I'm not going to try to go through the details, but it's useful to note that the one that just cultivating the Brahma Viharas on their own does not necessarily lead in the direction of insight. But after one has thoroughly developed them, reflecting on, well, what here is still a problem, and in particular, the direction that one might look is, there still seems like there's a me that's, there still seems that there's this perception of me, and with, me experiencing loving kindness, or me sending loving kindness, or other people, or me drawing other people into this space of goodwill. And you can investigate that. What are the constituents of that perception of self? If one has cultivated the Brahma Viharas well, you're already in a very spacious and bright place, and the investigation can go potentially deep. So that would be the direction to go if you're looking to deepen the practice of the Brahma Viharas into insight. And so with that, I will close and just, again, offer these words for your reflection tonight.